This series, the research has considerably advanced over the last 20 years. Power versus force was preceded by good 10 years of research, and to make sure that it met the scientific criteria of today's world, I went to the bother of getting a PhD so as to give it greater academic credence. So I got a PhD at age 65, and, and however, my PhD didn't come out till about a month after the book was published. So they said, so we put the PhD on the front. I said, no, you better wait until I get it. So the first edition of Power versus Force just said MD, and then a month later I got the PhD, so now it says MD PhD, which I thought would impress the world and give it greater firepower. Because at that time I thought the first significant review of the work would be in Brain Mind Bulletin, and which it was, and it got a very positive review and resulted in it being published in other countries. So the research, of course, has gone considerably further. The purpose of Power versus Force was to go from the familiar linear world and provide a context in which you could move into the less familiar nonlinear with some degree of comfort, that you're not moving into the purely mystical imaginary. So I was presenting it from the viewpoint of what I considered the average intelligent reader, who's also interested in spirituality and who is focused on the parameter, the leading edge of advanced theoretical physics, which is stuck right now because it can't get beyond this block between the linear and the nonlinear domain. It's gone about as far as it can go in the linear domain. So I was hoping to enlarge the paradigm of reality of science so that the intelligent reader, could comprehend the work and say, there must be something in the nonlinear domain that we should be looking at. So that was that purpose. The purpose of Power versus Force was to take us from the familiar, the Newtonian paradigm of reality, and prepare us that there is evidence of the reality of the nonlinear, because that's the great learning block. The intellectuals at the present time, there's almost like a political shift in psychiatry, for instance, in which they constantly use the word evidence-based. So Freud is, anything having to do with the nature of man is dead now, and we only talk about white mice, levers, and doses of meds and neurotransmitters. There's no human attached anymore. No mention of anything human is allowed because it has to be evidence-based. Well, the purpose of Power versus Force was evidence-based. So as you see, that scale of consciousness, which has become relatively well known and has been reprinted in many, many other books and cited in many references and is relatively well known, what I tried to do was present evidence-based documentation of the reality of the nonlinear domain and provide some kind of signpost so that the unfamiliar could be approached without undue anxiety. People who think the only world is the intellectual world of logic or the material world are rather frightened of anything that goes beyond that, their paradigm. It has to do with paradigm anxiety, that there's anything real that is beyond the science's capacity to measure is rather scary to many people, and and they vociferously get on television. You see them at night, trying to prove that near-death experiences are all due to brain physiology, and God is probably just a nucleus in the hypothalamus somewhere. Trying to keep reality confined into this box of the logical uncomfortable. And there are as some people whose life is devoted to knocking anything beyond the ordinary paradigm.